Now, for day 5, we are learning about Jackson and westward expansion. So we're going to go back to our 7th president of the U.S., and we're going to look at what he did, the good and the bad, and how our country was expanding during the time of his presidency. So go ahead in your long-term notes packet, turn to the day 5 page, and let's get started with our notes for the day. So first off, we're going to talk about Andrew Jackson, the 7th president of the U.S. We're going to look at good Andy, so the good things he did, and bad Andy, the bad things he did. Let's first take a look at good Andy. So while Andrew Jackson was president, he passed this tariff bill. So remember, a tariff is a foreign tax, a tax on foreign goods, to help promote U.S.-based businesses. Now, certain countries, including South Carolina, didn't like this new law, so they decided that they were going to nullify or straight up cancel out and ignore the law. This was called the nullification crisis. Okay, now Jackson says, South Carolina, you fool, you silly, silly fool. Don't do this, okay? I'm going to shut this down, and I'm going to keep the union together. Now, South Carolina threatened to secede or leave the union if the bill didn't go away. Jackson said, we're not playing those games, buddy. Go ahead and highlight the term South Carolina because they cause a lot of problems now and later, as well as keeps the union together because that was a big deal that Jackson was able to pull that off. So this all leads to another good aspect of good Andrew Jackson, good Andy, which is that he was a really strong leader, you guys. He did not let South Carolina secede from the union, and this protected the federal government power. This sent a message to the other states that just because you don't like a law that the national government has, you can't threaten to leave. That's a game we're not going to play. So he really maintained the strength of the federal government. So another good thing about Andrew Jackson is that he was seen as the common man's president. So the everyday man's president, because before this point, it felt like government was in the hands of the few wealthy and educated elite. Andrew Jackson brought down this level of control of the government to include all people. He represented the average guy, and he believed that the people should control the government, not the 1%. Now, additionally, this viewpoint led to the beginning of the Democratic Party. So Andrew Jackson was the first Democratic president. He expanded suffrage or voting rights to non-landowners. Now, we're still talking about white men. Don't get crazy here. But he was still working towards expanding voting rights to a larger population of Americans. Go ahead and highlight this word suffrage because that's an important vocab word to understand. Now moving on to bad Andy. So remember that during Andrew Jackson's presidency, the country was obsessed with this idea of manifest destiny. This idea that Americans had the God-given right to expand from sea to shining sea and grow their territory. Now, Jackson was all about this life, but there was one thing in his way. Native Americans, who already had pre-claimed territory in land that he wanted to settle, to grow and farm on. Now, Andrew Jackson ignored a Supreme Court ruling in Rochester v. Georgia that said that Native Americans have the right to keep their land. He straight up ignores it, you guys. And he does the complete opposite. He forces Native Americans off their land, and forces them to move to Oklahoma in the middle of the winter. Thousands die, so that white Americans can use their land and resources. This forced march from one territory to another by Native Americans is known as the Trail of Tears. As you can imagine, it was cold and miserable, and a lot of people died because it was a horrible treatment of Native Americans. So go ahead and highlight this court case, Rochester v. Georgia, because that may pop up on your STAAR, and it's important to understand its connection to the Trail of Tears. All right, Bad Andy Part 2. So if you guys remember the play we did in class, you'll remember that Andrew Jackson hates the National Bank. So that bank that Alexander Hamilton set up as a way to fix the debt that America had come across after the American Revolutionary War. Jackson gets rid of the bank because he sees it as a way to only help the rich get richer, and as he is the common man's president, doesn't think that this bank benefits the majority of the country. So he kills the bank, and he's very proud of this. I'm putting this in a bad Andy category, though, because it was something that was used to help with America's debt, but he's getting rid of it. and he vetoes the law that would keep the bank going, which is how he kills it. And he's so proud of this that on his deathbed, one of Andrew Jackson's last words were, "I killed the bank." Okay, so during this time of westward expansion, we not only saw Americans expanding west, we saw people from other countries moving to America for different reasons. So we're going to look at those three main groups of people who came over. We're going to look at why they went, where they went, and what they did. So make sure you're looking at this chart and this map. So first off, we have the Irish. So what was happening, you guys, is that in Ireland, there was a potato famine, which basically led to a food shortage. There was no food, and people were starving. So what do you do when you don't have food? You have to go somewhere where there is food. So a lot of people from Ireland, the Irish immigrants, came to the U.S. Now, they moved to urban areas and cities with the purpose of working in factories. So they were mainly in the Northeast, like in Boston and New York area, and they were working in manufacturing and factory jobs. Now, they live in the Northeast because that's where all the jobs are, and it's easy to get to your factory to work. And again, what do? They worked in factories. So, again, these are the Irish immigrants. Go ahead, use a green crayon on your map and do two things. First off, make this into a little key and shade in a little Irish green right here. And then on the map, I want you to shade in this area because this is where most of the Irish immigrants settled. All right, so the next immigrant group we're going to talk about are the Germans. So why they went. So in Germany, farmland was very expensive and there wasn't a lot of political freedom. So a lot of German immigrants came to the U.S. To look for cheaper farming and more freedom. So where did they go? They went to rural areas, which are like farmland areas, in the Midwest, so in like the middle of the country, because that's where the farming land was. And what did they do? They farmed. So just like with the Irish immigrants, go ahead and pause me, use an orange crayon to make a key for German, and then shade in these areas because this is where most of them settled to farm. All right, and the third group of immigrants we're going to talk about are the Chinese. So why did the Chinese come to the U.S.? They were looking for better, higher paying jobs. Now, where did they go? They went to California because it's closer to China. California is on the Pacific side, so that's where they came. Now, what did they do when they got here? A couple of things. So first of all, in 1849, there was a huge gold rush in California. Gold was discovered, and so people raced to come mine for gold, and a lot of those people were Chinese immigrants. Additionally, Chinese immigrants worked to build the railroads across the country. So again, they came for better paying jobs, they came to California, and they were looking for gold and to build railroads. Just like before, use a blue crayon this time to shade in your key and shade in California, which is where the Chinese immigrants came. Okay, so today we're actually going to come back whole group for a while to do a whole class activity. But if you're at this point and I haven't called us back together yet, go ahead and grab an envelope and start practicing that. If you finish the envelope work, go on to Quizlet and practice your flashcards.